Or that you just want to be part of the team, especially as the leader. You're like, I just want to work with people. I just want to collaborate. I just want to engage. And yet it seems so hard. So today I'm going to be talking about kind of how we energize people, especially as leaders, using power with instead of power over. My name is Broderick. I'm with Ignite Insight and Innovation. And I kind of choose my topics based on the things I still struggle with myself. I come up here, this power and the dynamics that come with power still surprise me because I'm like, no, I'm just one of the team. I have no power. And just because I say it doesn't necessarily make it true. And so this is an area that I still struggle with. I still will get caught up in, I will still get blindsided by. And so I have the luxury of being able to share it. And I'm judged all the time, so bring it on. And we're going to go through this as we're going forward with it. So we first have to just kind of make sure that we're talking when we're thinking about leadership and why we actually have to care about power dynamics and things. I'm going to let you in on a little secret. I have never sat in an executive meeting or a senior leadership meeting, sat together with others and went, how are we going to screw with people today? It's never happened. It's never happened. And yet it's super easy to kind of feel like that because the impact may not really always align with the intent of our leaders. And a lot of that actually has to do with the power that's coming into play. So one of the primary jobs for leaders is to build teams. But we have to first understand why we're building teams and what team means to understand how power can come into play. So a lot of people will use the word team and they kind of throw it around. But I use this term, team evolution, and I start with individuals. So just because I form people together doesn't mean you're a team. I'm from Michigan, Detroit Lions. I know, I just lost you. I'm sorry, but it's true. Okay? But here's the thing. And as individuals, we do have our own strengths, our own weaknesses, our own fears. And just telling me I'm part of with other people doesn't magically mean I'm a team. Now, a lot of people understand that when they go into work that they are going to be working with others. So often it's not too hard to get to what we call a group state. And a group is where people cooperate. So I want you to think of like a relay race. You got 4 people, these 4 people. If the third person falls down, does anyone blame the anchor for losing? Now they can get up on that newscast after and we're like, we all win or lose as one. But everybody knows that third person fell. Right? So it's kind of my part, your part. Someone took my water. Jake, can you help me out? Thanks. The wait staff's so great, but they took my water. So a group is often where they cooperate. You can think of a relay race. A lot of organizations have these handoffs. Let me hand this off to marketing. Let me hand this off to sales. Let me hand this off to the release team. My part's good. But a team starts when you start going from cooperation to collaboration. And here's what it sounds different. Instead of my part, your part, let's build this together. And what I get from collaboration that I don't get from cooperation, thank you very much, is some of that wisdom of the crowd. We talk a good game about, wisdom of the crowd and why it's so important. And yet, if we're not actually collaborating, we're just having people present, but we're not benefiting from that wisdom. It's where we start to get that innovation, where we start to get, where we start to get that knowledge and diversity and experiences to be truly innovative and deliver value. But I'm going to highlight something that a lot of people don't realize, and I didn't realize. When you're in a team state, yes, you're starting to see bits of cool things happening because collaboration is starting to happen, but how many of you are leaders in this room that are panicking because you have not checked your email in the last 5 minutes, or know someone that might be panicking? Okay? Because in a team, the leader is the hub. Everything still starts and stops with you. You got to make sure no balls drop, anything along those lines. But that hub behavior is what actually prevents that next high performance. I had a lead developer come to me once and said, Tricia, my team is not stepping up. They're a bunch of millennials. First of all, I don't know what it is about like every generation just tries to crap on the next generation. Like it's a rite of passage, like you get to a certain age and you get to forget. Like my grandparents told me my eyes were gonna fall out from Atari. They didn't, right? But like we just do those kinds of things. And so, but I looked at him, I said, well, who's deciding what's gonna get worked on? I am. Who's estimating? I am. Who's prioritizing? I am. Like every question I said, he said him. So who goes above and beyond, him or his team? He does. So if you want to get to that next performance level, you got to stop being the hub as the leader. And power comes into that. And there was a lot of people, Diana Larson and I started writing a book right before COVID, so it was kind of a weird timing. And we were talking about that we were seeing situations where we would have high-performing teams, but if anything changed, like they weren't very stable. Like there was a lot of turnover happening, lots of things. And it was like, there's something that's still missing even in that high-performing team. And we started talking about what does it mean to be a resilient learning team? And how do we start helping people respond to chaos, not just complexity? Welcome to 2020 and beyond. And really before that, because it was happening in those ways. But again, if you're not dealing with power, you can't even get to team half the time, let alone to those performance levels. So one of the things is to start thinking about how do we stop being the hub? Because we needed to be the hub for the first three. We had to be. That's why when people say things like, and I might get some that counter me with this, and I'm happy to debate, right? But they're like, if you don't need a manager or a leader for a self-organizing team, oh, that's cute. I've been on one where we were super experienced, but you had nobody bringing you together to collaborate on a shared purpose, a shared goal of what you were trying to accomplish. So we have to stop being that hub, and one of the ways that you stop being that hub so that you can get to that resilience, that high performance, is by addressing the fact that learning is a team sport. And it means that we have to address power, especially as a leader, because they will keep you as the hub, because you've been the hub up to that point. So I'm going to talk about power dynamics for a second with this. And I just realized, actually, here's what I'm going to do. Pause for a second. At your tables for a minute, or with a person nearby, I'll put the slide back up for here for a second. Talk about with one other person for just a second while I pass out something. Where do you think you are in this? Your team member might be sitting next to you and disagrees, and that's okay. Or you talk to a different person if you don't want to admit it to your person next to you. But where do you think you are? Where's your team? And if you're on 15 teams, that's a whole nother discussion to have. Okay? So talk at your tables for just a second. So there was, it's funny because just doing this like brings back memories. At one of the Agile Alliance conferences, there was a hotel suite like party. It was a big suite, so it was a lot of us. And security showed up, and the person whose room it was opened the door and doesn't say anything. He just raises his hand, and instantly 100 of us go. And security just looks at us and walks away, like it just left us. And I was like, well, okay, that's a trick with this. We throw the word team around frequently. And often for many, many people, it's a group. And then we wonder why we're not getting the benefits of Agile. Because you don't really start seeing some of those benefits until you're at least collaborating. But if you're the hub, it's a whole nother problem. And I will acknowledge, my name is Tricia Broderick, and I'm a recovering hub. I still have moments. I like my checklist. I did not give up my Franklin Covey printed planner, like physical, until they started making fun of me at airports. Because I still was carrying it, okay? Like I like my check marks, but it's problematic. But one of the reasons that it's hard is because of power and how it comes into play. So let's talk about some of those power dynamics. The one that's most known is formal. Formal is the hierarchy, who's your boss. They have the ability to force action or you will be terminated. This is the one most people think about when it comes to power. That causes sometimes fear and insecurities or concerns, bias with different things, but oh no, the boss just walked in. Another one is influence or informal power. This is the person that, like, where'd she go? Is Linda Rising still in here? Like, when Linda Rising walks into the room, you're like, oh. Like, so much respect, so much knowledge over the years, so much things that you're like, when Linda talks, I'm listening, like deep listening, because I respect what she's contributed, right? Like, she has a power when it comes to me. I have a bias, like, I'm like, well, Linda said it. So it's gotta be true, right? And yet, Linda's back there cringing. She's like, no, Trisha, that is not accurate, right? And that's where influence power can come into play. When you've built a lot of respect and knowledge that you don't realize you have power over other people in a lot of ways. It's easy for people to just defer to you. I had an individual on a project, and he was really frustrated. He wanted to move on to a new team. And he was like, I can't. They keep saying I'm necessary. And I said, well, okay. 3 people have to speak before you can. And he started speaking, or like the facilitator asked a question, and the entire team turned and stared at him. And I'm standing behind him to where only he can see me, and I'm just going, 0, 0, 3, 0. Uncomfortable length of time people waited before someone eventually spoke, and then everybody again turned to him, and I went, 1. He's sweating, he's not good. But by the time he finally, third person went, he went, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. But his team wasn't doing it because they didn't like him. His team wasn't doing it because they were even afraid of him. His team went, you're smart. You know what this is. Let's just defer to you. And he was easy and jumped in. Then you have dominant power. Dominant is where it's the majority. It's the norm. What's status quo as we're going through these? Now, dominant power almost can go unnoticed sometimes because it is norm. But the problem is to truly get collaboration, every person at that table must feel like they belong and can contribute. And if only the dominant majority is being heard, it's a problem. I own that I didn't always think about this power because I was an agilist, right? We just open doors for people, and then because we're agile, we collaborate. Oh. No, not necessarily true. And so dominant powers is where you're really allowing for all voices to be heard, to be seen, to feel included. And then you have unidentified power. This is the one that people will often refer to as like the elephant in the room. And unidentified power is tricky because sometimes it's completely unknown. There's something impacting, there's something contributing, but we don't know where it's coming from. And then sometimes it's just not safe to be transparent about what that elephant is. Because you're just talking about it in the hallway, just not to the person or the situation at hand. But there's sometimes some unidentified power that's coming into play. Now, these always exist. Always. I wanted to believe, no, I'm just one of the team. I'm a good person. I'm one of you. I have a computer science degree. You don't want me coding anymore. It's not good. But like in my head, I didn't want to be an executive because I bashed executives right along with everybody else. But they are always present. And they are what influences engagement and energy in teams. So as a leader, I had to figure out and start paying attention to how was I going to countermeasure or diminish those power dynamics. because there was no way to make sure that I was never going to have a dominant power. It's going to be present. There's no way to avoid a formal power, potentially, if you have a hierarchy in your organization. So how was I going to start making it more positive impact instead of a negative impact? So here's what I'm going to have you do first. So you should have at least one on the table. If your table does not have at least one sheet, I need to know. Take a second, read the scenario, okay, at there. And then you're going to talk about what power dynamics are showing up in that scenario. So again, if your table doesn't have any, let us know, because we're going to move a couple from a different table for it. So I'm going to share something just for a second. They're like, so where did you learn the hand raise thing? Anybody know the source of this? Because I actually don't know. What? The source of who came up with the technique of the facilitation? Is that from, okay. Awesome, so I should have learned that much earlier, so thank you for making me learn that. The other thing is I was the conference chair for Agile 2017, and this gentleman here just was like, that might be the biggest thing I learned was just this facilitation technique. And during the Agile 2017, I messed up the slides when I was kicking off something, and I had to do the failure bow. And that is the only thing. No one talks about anything else I did that year but the failure bow. So it's going to be the hand-raising thing this year. So what are some of the power dynamics that showed up in this story? And I'll repeat so that everybody hears so we don't have to pass the mic real quick. But from over here, what's something that showed up? Formal power. Okay? You saw that a little bit by Sue just inviting herself. Okay? How about in the middle? Unidentified. Where are you seeing that a bit?
Because they didn't really trust her. She's just a person like an elephant in the room because nobody knows who she is and they don't trust who she is.
Like it's some of that baggage, right? Like technically there's history. It's like, did something actually happen or not? And it's just, you know, like when you have those hairs stand up on the back of your neck and you're not really sure what's going, like, but it's there. We don't know. We're unsure. Okay? How about another one? Do we see any others?
Dominant. The people that are sharing their successes, they're the only ones speaking. There are other people in the room that could have chimed in when they were done.
Yeah. So it became this, they were just, a couple people shared just these things, and so everybody went with that, because that seems to be what's acceptable, and we're just going to go with that, versus challenging and trying to do something and actually doing a real retro as you're going forward with this. Did Sue wake up that morning going, hey, I know, I'm going to be all up in their grill today and make them super uncomfortable? No. Sue has good intent, right? But it doesn't matter. There's still impact. And it is easy. And I have said it. These scenarios were not hard for Diana and I to write because we were like, yep, okay, so here's what I did. But the reality was come on. I'm just one of the team, stop. That's not fair, right? Because it stinks. Here's another little secret. Sometimes being the leader is really freaking hard. Because it can't be about you. And yet, you're still a human being. And it hurts, right? It's easy to get that defensive, which makes you do what we call power over. Suck it up, Buttercup. Just go with it. You should know better. Are you really telling me what I can and can't do, right? Why were you insinuating that, right? And it just creates these things. And even if you never say any of those vocally, you're saying them up here. Or your friend is. Okay? And this happens because you're human. And it's easy to kind of go there because you're trying to do, you're nervous too. You just got a brand new job. You want to do a good job, right? You're trying to do the best. I remember writing my first email after becoming an executive, and I was so panicked. So I basically just wrote hi, and I still had someone go, what did you mean by that? Right? But it's because it's present and it's there. So what we want to do is shift to what we refer to as power with. If power over is exerting control, trivializing, dismissing, power with is acknowledging as a leader, these exist, and how can I be supportive, collaborative, and respectful of that power that's coming into play so that my team can take their ownership, that they can develop, that they can grow. Now, there are a lot of different countermeasures, but I'm going to give one for each type just to give you something tangible to walk away with in terms of how do I do this, right? How do I shift to that power with? So for formal, one of the things is don't solve the problem. Don't solve their problem. I was slightly nervous when I realized I had heels on if that was going to go badly. It's been years since I've gotten to do that. I just, like, little happiness right there. Shine a spotlight on it. So I had a Scrum team that was working with me, and I was a Scrum Master at that time, and they came to me and they were like, our team, notice the theme? Our team is not stepping up, right? You hear this all the time. And I was like, they're like, we're doing all the work. And I will own, my initial reaction was, well, I'll sign the tasks out. Don't judge me. Don't you do it. You've all thought of it too once, right? And I thought about doing it, and I was like, no, I can't do that. So instead I thought, how do I shine a spotlight on this problem? So I took a piece of paper at the end of their sprint planning, and I wrote out each person on the team's name, and I listed out all the tasks they had. And the two people that were complaining, they had a ridiculous number of tasks. And then the others had one task or two tasks. And I'm visually putting this up in the room. And I was like, oh, this is good, right? Because what I expect is them to go, oh, maybe we should do something, right? Oh, no, no, no. What happened was one of those other team members looked at that, one of those leads and went, would you please let us help? It was happening in sprint planning where the senior experts, right, were like, oh, it's just faster if I do it. I'll just do it. I'll just do it. And they were feeling the weight of the load, but not realizing how their influential power, and because they had dominant power, they were actually broken a Scrum rule, and they were still called leads. And so people deferred to it. So it wasn't until we shined a spotlight on it that they could solve that problem. And if I had attempted to solve it, I would have made it worse. So one of the ways of addressing formal power is actually shining spotlights on the problems to demonstrate that you're looking for them to solve those. A countermeasure for influence, and honestly, a lot of them as together, is to think about how do you provide some balance. I got to co-write a book with Diana Larson, right up there with Linda Rising and things, right? I've respected Diana for years. I started attending this conference in 2007. The only one I missed was 2020, and that doesn't count. I ended my anniversary trip in Europe early so I could come back to this. And by the way, don't ever fly home through customs and the person says, well, why were you in Europe? And you're like, anniversary trip, and you're by yourself. He's like, and I'm like, oh, well, we had connected. He's sure. I totally looked like I was smuggling things, okay? So it would have been really easy for this influence power to have affected how we wrote that book. I could have easily deferred to Diana. I could have easily went, okay, that makes most sense. She's written multiple books, all of which you should check out. Okay? But I could have easily done that. But Diana was amazing. We had to do this over Zoom, by the way. And still, Diana was amazing of making sure, I never felt like it wasn't pair writing. There is no part of that book that I wrote a section and she wrote a section. We truly co-wrote this book. And throughout it, she would make points of highlighting, what I was bringing to the table that she didn't have. Or and how what she was bringing to the table complemented what I was doing and how it was inspiring new ideas. And with every one of those comments she was highlighting to me, yes, my respect for her was only growing, but the power wasn't negatively impacting the work. It was adding to it. And in some ways, I got to do this interview afterwards. I will get up here and speak for days. this is my happy place. Writing, not my happy place. Like, I'm so insecure, so nervous about it. But I got to the end of this process going, I co-wrote a book. And that's because, yeah, thanks. But that's because, and Diana had no idea I was saying any of this, so hi. But that's because Diana was providing that balance while we were working together. And it made it the world. Then you have the ability to expand connections. I had somebody approach me once. How many people have been a part of or created what is known as like a tiger team? Like that, we got to have the best of the best people on a special project. I've created lots and lots and lots of tiger teams. I've been on lots and lots of tiger teams. And I created one. And a person on the team, one of my team members, came into my office. And he wasn't being disrespectful in any way. He was genuinely wanting to talk with me. And there was a formal dynamic in here, too, because I'm, not only his boss, but I'm like his boss's boss's boss, right? Comes into my office and says, did it ever occur to you that the reason they're the best is because you keep picking them? It hurt people. It hurt a lot because it was so true. I think about how many times when we pick people, they get the best environments, the best situations, the best tools, the focus, the things. They get the learning opportunity, which means they grow, which means they're more likely to be the best candidate for the next learning opportunity, and over again. And so I had to start thinking about what is that doing for creating the norm? Who's being considered the influential people, right? What's happening there? Myself as an extrovert, how many of our meetings were geared towards me? Who are my extroverts in the room? I won't ask who are my introverts. I learned better. Who are my extroverts? Stand up, enjoy it. This is we're in public again. Yay! I just also want to be the loud room, right? But like a lot of meetings, a lot of interactions are for me's. I teach a lot with Jake Calabrese, and there was a point when we were collaborating, and he goes, I'm just going to keep talking till you think of something. And it worked, okay? It was just because that's how my brain works, right? And it's engagement. But that's not helpful for everybody. Everybody's voice wasn't being heard, wasn't being seen, wasn't being included. So I had to really double down on some facilitation techniques that better allowed all voices to be heard. Whether they're liberating structures like 1, 2, 4, all, meaning first, think for yourself a little bit of what you might answer to this question. Then find a partner and discuss it. Then find 4, and then start building up from that, which allows each person to have some time for themselves, but also engage and be collaborative. They're not hard techniques, and yet I was the person in the room that constantly went into a meeting and went, so tell me what you think. And it was just a mass shout out, which worked for people like me, not for everybody involved. So you have to think about how are you kind of providing that balance, but expanding the connection so that people have the ability to meet other people, to see other things. One of the ways that I expanded connections once was, how many organizations have that, by show of hands for me, how many organizations have it where the leaders all get to decide what initiatives are gonna happen? Projects and things like that? Okay, it's pretty common, right? So we did an initiative, so listen to how we got around this, ready? We did a leadership initiative to have non-leadership initiatives. But the goal was to have other people learning what it meant to do something, right? Because I would have somebody that would come to me like, I want to do a blog, I want to do a blog, I want to do a blog. And all I kept thinking was, I'm going to be spending time finding somebody who's going to write content every single day, right? But then I realized that's knowledge I have in my head. How do I help other people build that knowledge? So, Okay, start your blog. Anybody want to guess how many days they had before they had no content? They made it 4. Get more optimistic, people. Okay? But think about how you can expand those connections, how you can create that space for people, how you can help promote and create platforms and openings and opportunities. I got this idea actually from Lisa Crispin, and like now when people ask me to speak at a meetup, I only agree if I can name somebody else that is underrepresented to speak at their meetup too. It's a way for other people to get opportunities. And it's a way to expand that, but I'm able to do that. I have the privilege, I have the access right now, and it's something I can do. And so think about how are you expanding those connections, or are you creating it where it's easy to just go with the norm, with the status quo today, or are you challenging it? And the last one we're going to talk about before we get into an activity is embracing conflict. How many people have had or said or have someone they know have said that line that's like, it's just business, it's not personal? First of all, you are quoting a movie about the mob as your business best practice. No, it is personal. You are a human being. You're entitled to be a human being. It is personal. The benefit of wisdom of the crowd means diverse experiences, thoughts, opinions. What does that mean? Conflict. Now, I don't like drama. But conflict is actually necessary. If I got assigned to a team and they're like, you're going to love this team. They never have conflict because they didn't speak to each other. That's not, I'm still in individuals at that level, not any kind of team. So I know conflict is hard. I like conflict. I actually have more difficulty when I can't have conflict and just have the conversation about something, because for me that does turn into drama, than to just have the conflict. But I know for a lot of people, they make conflict and drama the same thing. And it's easy to kind of go there, to think the worst, and to get defensive. I had a situation literally this week where somebody made a comment that it was factually not well, I didn't feel appreciated. I'm like, well, we did X, Y, and Z, to do appreciations, and I immediately responded with that in terms of defensiveness. I'm going to blame the jet lag. And then immediately, I was like, no, that wasn't what was important. It was that somebody was acknowledging they didn't feel appreciated. It doesn't matter what we tried. They still didn't feel it. And am I acknowledging that? And so one of the things that when we embrace conflict as a leader is, are we able to go to finding some level of truth in whatever is being said? There's a concept known as 2% truth that comes from CRR Global, that is there a little bit of truth in anything anybody says? Now, sometimes it's just 2%. Sometimes it's more. I worked for Pearson Education, and I had my first female VP. I was so excited. I was like, yes, finally, I'm going to have a female leader, boss. I'm so excited. We couldn't stand each other. Oh, my gosh, we couldn't stand each other. On every level, we couldn't stand each other. Personally, professionally, to the point that I was like, how did we get through the interview? I don't understand. It was so bad. At one point, she came into my office, and who do I know? Jenny. And I'm like, at one point, she came into my office. I'm still sitting. She stands over me and goes, I've come to accept that you require more explicit validation than I do, so I want you to know I appreciate you. I did not hit her, people. But it was clearly not working. It was off, like what I had hired, thought I was doing, what was happening. But I mean, name the power dynamic, it was going down. There was like a formal, there was, except for maybe influence. It was just bad. And here I am going, I speak about these things, and this stinks. Like, I'm horrible. Like, I should stop speaking. I am not, this is not good, right? But there was something unidentified that I just couldn't figure it out. I just didn't understand what was going on, and every way I was trying wasn't working. So I did resign. And on my last day, she said, I would like to give you some feedback. Now, power with not happening at all here, right? There's definitely some power over with it coming at me. But I wanted to go, wait, sometimes I'm not the leader. But I still get a choice of how I want to embrace conflict. I still get the choice to be how to be a leader from another leader. And so she says the one thing that I actually am slightly proud of. She says, you can't connect with people. Look, I've got a laundry list of issues. I'm loud, I'm obnoxious, I'm like, there's little filter from here to here, like very little filter, right? I need my check marks, I make lists of lists, like I got issues, people. But I can, and I do try to connect with people. I try to be vulnerable, I try to be authentic, and I feel like in some ways, that's one of my strengths, to the point that there are people that I had worked with at Pearson that have met existing coworkers, current coworkers, and so it would have been really easy for me to just go, you're wrong. But I went, what's the 2% truth? What can I agree with in that? Because there was some unidentified power going on. And my response was, yes, you and I did not connect. I don't care about the rest of it. There was a truth in there. And there was something there that we didn't understand what was going on, and that helped us to facilitate at least some of that conversation about that unidentified power happening. Because I chose to respond with, where could I find 2% truth? Now, it was hard. I will honestly admit that I went, 2% truth, before I could respond. But there was truth in there. So here's the activity I'm going to have you do. And this might be a little tough for you, but I think you got it, okay? Partner up at your table for a minute, and there's a box on there. And everybody in this room, at some point or not, has not said something shoulda, coulda, woulda to some senior manager, to their boss, to the leader, to their executive. So your first step right now is to think, when was a moment that you didn't say something to that senior leader? And what power dynamic was at play and why you didn't? Okay, so first think of a scenario where you didn't say it, you shoulda, coulda, woulda, to whether it was your boss, a senior leader, executive, CEO, customer even. And then what power dynamic prevented it? Go ahead, come up with that first. One of the trickiest parts of leadership is that sometimes you're not allowed to share the thing that might be the context necessary. But sometimes we just don't think to share it. Sometimes we could, and we're like, well, they know that. And even if they do, they may need to hear it again. And that's not because they think you're not doing your job, it's because they need some safety. Or they were in shock and didn't hear it the first time you said it. Like, the very first time you put up that reorg design PowerPoint, no one's listening to anything that comes out of your mouth. They're all looking at that image. We once saw somebody put the image up and it was blurry. Oh my gosh, it was so funny watching everybody freak out. Like, they were like, no. The reality is you don't always get the luxury to avoid that unidentified power. But there's more times that you can do something. There's so many times I'll hear something like, well, you can't say no to the CEO. I have. Now, I didn't do no. But he wanted his bio updated. And he tried to go directly to a developer and just, can you update my bio? And we were just early. This was like, I don't know, 2008. And we were trying, I was like, no, I was product owner. I was like, nope, you don't take work from anybody. Come from me. And this poor developer, I thought he was going to pee himself trying to like send the CEO to me, right? But he does. And the CEO comes walking in, and he's like, Trisha, I want my bio updated. And I was like, okay. And I said, well, we have this work that's costing the company 10 grand a month. We have this work that's going on that's a loss of, 8 customers, right? Like, and I had all these things. So which of these do you want to remove so we can update your bio? Or we can do it in 2 weeks. What did he choose? If he does it, be afraid. Right? Like there's something else going on that I'm not sure I'd be very comfortable in that leadership of decision making in general. But if by giving the information, again, senior leaders are going, we hire the best people. If you keep saying yes, is it really their fault? Yes and no, right? Because they should not also understand multitasking. But the reality is, I actually had somebody say, don't say yes to any volunteering. Text was sent to me. Like, I'm not speaking from I'm just judging you. I do it, right? I understand. You want to deliver. You want to do a good job. You want to be passionate. But part of being the best is being truthful, is being transparent. Because it helps minimize those unidentified power dynamics. It made it so that it was easy. People were less afraid to engage with that. But if you're not willing to be transparent, if you're not willing to be vulnerable, if you're not willing to share additional context, to find that 2% truth, neither will your teams. It starts with you. And it's not easy, but it starts with you. I had somebody once come to me like, you keep telling us to experiment and you're okay with failure, but you never failed. I'm like, oh. Clearly, I'm not sharing enough. And then I went overboard and I shared too much and then I scared everybody. So think about how you're incorporating that 2%, what you're doing, because this is hard. And you don't always get the luxury to be even able to be transparent. When we're dealing with HR issues, can't share. And yet you feel all the judgment. In fact, people will be talking about it on the side. They'll ask you questions, right? And you gotta just stand there. But you can still, even in that moment, what's the 2% truth? That people are hurting. That people are afraid. And I don't have to diminish that, but I still don't have to share, right? But by honoring the reality of when someone gets fired, it's gonna cause other people to be nervous. That's being respectful. That's doing power with. That's being supportive. And it's hard to not be defensive about it in that moment. But that's part of leadership. You go home and you drink tequila. That is what I recommend with that. So I think, Jenny, how are we going to do some of the Q&A part?